Hello, everyone. I'm by myself. I'm not by myself. Dr. Nadine is here, obviously. She's just off screen, waiting for me to get through today's empathy exercises before we have our discussion about turning red. If you don't know, obviously Dr. Kristen is not here. She is currently attending the Urban Promise board meeting at a Franciscan retreat in Malibu, which is a very incongruous life circumstance for her right now, given the news recently here in the United States that broke last night, which I will talk about. But we're going to talk about turning red, which I'm very excited to do. We always love having these conversations with Nadine because she is as much of a nerd as we are about these things and thinks about them a lot. So it should be a great discussion. We will get to it after some empathy exercises. But first, okay, we're excited. Yeah. Oh, hi, Jay. I do have this. I've got this, girl. I'm in my office. I'm fine. I'm not in front of a bunch of people. In an actual room full of humans. But speaking of human beings, I would be remiss if I didn't mention possibly the biggest empathy exercise in the history of this country in a long time. If you are unaware and you're watching this maybe outside the United States or you don't pay attention to the news, last night, for the first time ever, there was a draft opinion leaked from the Supreme Court of the United States. The draft opinion appears to be written by Justice Samuel Alito and appears to indicate that the court will overturn Roe versus Wade and Casey versus Planned Parenthood, I think, or the Casey case. It's the Planned Parenthood case from the early 90s. When they vote on it later this year and the start of the summer, which would effectively make abortion illegal on a federal level and leave it up to states to decide. If you've been following this case or following the United States at all, you know there's a lot of states that are both passing very restrictive abortion laws and passing, just Connecticut just the other day passed a safe haven law, making Connecticut a safe haven state for humans seeking abortions. So, this kind of blew up the spot. Way to go, SCOTUS intern or staff member who leaked it during the Met Gala, because that was a weird ass time to be on Twitter, let me tell you. But we're not going to have a full discussion about it today. There are three things that I just wanted to say. One in 4 U.S. women have an abortion before the age of 45. 2, Dr. Kristen and I, and I'm pretty sure I can speak for Dr. Nadine, are all big fans of gender equity and working towards gender equity. And we can never have gender equity if half the population who have uteruses, regardless of their gender identity, don't have bodily autonomy. And 3, I'm not the only person saying this. A lot of people are saying this right now and have always said this when abortion is restricted. This will not stop people from getting abortions. It will mean more people will hurt themselves or get hurt, and more people will die because the abortions will not be safe and legal. So this does nothing, statistically we know, almost this does nothing to curb the actual number of humans seeking to terminate their pregnancy. It just means they're not doing it in a way that is protecting themselves, either from medical harm and death or from legal harm. So it's real hard to have empathy at times like these, especially on what is one of the most divisive issues facing humanity ever. But a friendly reminder that empathy is not about agreeing with someone. Empathy is about understanding. And it is okay to take breaks from empathy when you need to. to take care of yourself. So a lot of people, regardless of their feelings on this, are all up in all sorts of feelings. So give yourself time to feel those feelings and process them in the most holistic and healthy way that you can. Yeah, and maybe we'll try for empathy when it's not so fresh. All right, that's my piece on abortion. Now we're going to do empathy exercises, which run the gamut of, things of interest. First of all, speaking of medical science and half the human population, there was a recent study in the United Kingdom that found that asthma research disadvantages women by disregarding sex hormones. I feel like this whole list I could just have like Dr. Nadine. You know what? Nadine, are you cool if I pull you in? I'm going to pull you in.
Okay.
Are you ready? You can just chat about these if you want to, because I'm like looking at my list. I'm like, literally, the last two are Canadian.
Oh, okay, great.
Full stop. And then all the other ones are like intersections of Nadine. So I thought this one was really interesting because if you've read one of our Abbey Research Bibles, Invisible Women, pause. Will I procure Invisible Women? The data bias in a world designed for men. This was not a surprise to me that we disregarded the impact of sex hormones. We don't really talk about sex hormones in medical research. Why would we, Nadine?
I mean, why would we talk about it like integral part of, the human body when we're doing medical research? That's ridiculous.
That was like, I think my favorite vaccine story was like, we didn't consider menstruation when we did vaccine tests. So there's literally like now I've signed petitions. There's women who have had or humans who menstruate who have had real problems with their post-vaccination menstruation.
Yep.
And the pharmaceutical companies were like, whoops, my bad. So stop doing it, science. That's all I've got for that one. Like just stop. And hi Sasha. Lovely to see you here. The next one up, good news, I think. Harvard announced last week that they will put aside $100 million to fund a new study after they found they had a lot of ties to slavery, which is, a lot of institutions. But specifically, they did a research study at Harvard. And they're part of a larger research group at United States universities looking at the financial legacy of people who enslaved and Africans and how they benefited from that financial wealth and stability. So I think it's a good thing. I don't know. Are you guys doing anything like this in Canada? You didn't really have like in terms of, I don't know, the impact on Indigenous populations?
I would say, yeah, a lot of Canada's wealth has been built off the back of our Indigenous populations. We certainly also had slavery here in Canada. It functioned differently than it did in the US, but I'm not aware of any studies being done like this. But I do find this very, very interesting. And the irony is not lost on me that the reason Harvard has $100 million to fund a study like this is probably not due in small part to how they have benefited from slavery. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I hope they've done the self-reflexive analysis of this, that they're like, we have $100 million. And they have, there's been a part of the discussion about providing reparations for the people directly impacted by the use of slavery and the profit off of enslaved folks at Harvard. But I don't think that's part of this money. They are setting some money aside, but it's just reparations get tricky around here. We were just talking about it last night because the three remaining survivors of the Tulsa massacre won a court case in their attempt to get reparations.
Oh, wow.
And I was watching Joy Reid, and she was interviewing someone about it, and he was just like, and they interviewed the local Tulsa mayor last year when it was the centenary of the massacre, and she was like, so your family, like you literally, your family legacy, or your family had enslaved people, like they are part of this legacy. Why aren't you considering reparations? He's like, because we're not going to punish people for what happened years ago. I was like, but the reason you're the mayor of Tulsa
is because of what happened years ago.
But we are punishing people for what happened to them years ago.
Well, and I mean, it's interesting because, on the one hand, you're saying, well, we can't punish people for what was done years ago, but I can certainly benefit from what was done years ago. That's fine.
Right. And, like generational wealth is a real problem in Black and brown communities.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because of systemic discrimination and oppression and the legacy of enslavement. So, like, we are punishing Black and brown folks.
Of course we are.
For what happened to them, like, every day. But yeah, so good news, I think. All right, we'll keep going here. This one is good news. I found this yesterday. Have you heard of this place or this
everywhere is queer
Safer Spaces? It's a terrible headline. I read it out loud 3 times. But it's Safer Spaces, which is a place, like an online resource, because this man wanted to know like where he could go in the 50 states to find like queer hangouts or like queer owned businesses or whatever. And there wasn't a resource. So he made one.
Oh, that's kind of dope. Okay.
So like it's got a map with like retail, wellness, restaurants, gyms, bars. So like however you are looking to be a part of or engage with or support queer communities across the country, we've now got a map for that.
Okay, I like that idea. And then who determines what makes a space queer safe or queer friendly?
Right, that's a great question, and I don't know the answer to that. But I would hope there's maybe some if you can submit an application on the homepage. So so I think I'm literally clicking on this link. We're learning together, folks. Apply to be on our master map here, queer-owned business job board. Yeah, so I guess it's like, I don't know what the application process is like. That's a great question. We should ask some questions about it just to make sure. I mean, I think it's coming from a really good place. But
I mean, in concept, I think this is a great idea.
Yeah, but you're right. Who is deciding what is? And I would imagine, I would hope so if it's like crowdsourced.
That's what I was wondering. Like that was my assumption, but I realized I didn't know if that was the case. That if it was crowdsourced and if there were review, like it's kind of like Queer Yelp where people are like 5 stars, very queer friendly.
Right. I would hope so. I hope it's Queer Yelp. Okay. More fun times with gender and women. Google is now going to let you limit ads about pregnancy and weight loss.
Can I get rid of weight loss ads altogether? I hate them. I hate them.
Please, because one of the things from yesterday from the Met Gala, everyone was talking about, not everyone, but people were talking about Kim Kardashian's dress because she wore
Marilyn Monroe's dress.
Yeah, from the Happy Birthday, Mr. President part of our U.S. history. Mm-hmm. And everyone just kept sharing the quote from her that she lost 16 pounds in 3 weeks so that she could fit into the dress. And everyone was saying that like it was an accomplishment. And I was like, oh boy. I mean, I'm glad she had a goal. I don't know. Hopefully she did it healthily. But like for me, I was like, oh, that's probably real triggering for lots of folks with
a lot of people and
with body issues.
You know what? Like I'm not going to comment on her personal choice and her own body because I don't know. I'm not her. I don't live in her body. I know for me, it would not be possible for me to lose 16 pounds in 3 weeks and be okay health-wise. So that is not a thing that I will be doing. anytime soon. And I just, yeah, I don't love that that's sort of part of the story of her in this dress, because I just don't feel like, wearing an archival dress from Marilyn Monroe's collection is like a thing that most of us will experience in our lives, and therefore don't really need instruction on how to make that happen.
How to do that.
Yeah.
And like she described everything she went through, and it doesn't sound fun. I don't know what a sauna suit is, but I'm imagining it's a suit that makes you feel like you're in a sauna, and that doesn't sound like how I want to spend my downtime. But yeah, all that to say, I believe this is good. I hope all the other platforms are more conscious about the impact that ads have, and allowing people agency to choose. There's lots of people trying to make advertisements and make money off of ads on YouTube and Google and all those places. We can let people choose what they do and don't see. So I'm glad Google is stepping up on that one, even though they probably don't have a great record of doing that in the past.
But yeah, in theory, I really like this. Like, if they're going to be targeted ads, then let me choose which ads will be targeted towards me. I like that.
Right. Okay, moving on to our two Canadian stories coming from our Canadian correspondent, Jay, and also our Canadian team member, Eleanor, who gave us the one about the Freshii Percy scandal. Have you heard of this?
No, I missed that one.
Oh boy. Okay, we'll get to Freshii in a minute. I have no idea what it was, but we had a team meeting yesterday, and Eleanor was telling it about it, and I was like, that needs to be an empathy exercise. Oh. So this one is good news from Canada. That they have ended their discriminatory blood ban and are replacing it with a screening based on sexual behavior for all donors. So I didn't know Canada still had a discriminatory.
Yeah.
So I was yesterday years old when I learned that. But yeah, I mean, you shouldn't discriminate against people.
So it's interesting because there's been some ambivalence around this switch amongst folks that I've spoken to. So the way this is being framed, it depends on sort of where you're getting your news. Like initially this was framed as, they're just lifting the ban on men having sex with men becoming blood donors. Right. And everyone was like, yay. And then I was having some conversation with some of my friends who are queer men, and they were like, okay, but low key, what they've basically done is they have changed the wording. And because it's still going to be, they are still going to, as far as I understand, ban donations from people who have engaged in anal intercourse. They were like, this will still disproportionately disqualify a lot of the same potential donors. So regardless of how, I guess, somebody's blood test and screening comes, like they will not even screen people who are engaging in anal intercourse. So they were like, the discrimination is still there. By and large, they're just not explicitly saying if you're a dude, like if you're if you're a person with a penis having sex with a person with another penis, you are just banned from donating blood. So it's still somewhat discriminatory. Now, as a sex educator, I will say that unprotected anal intercourse is one of the higher risk activities when it comes to the transmission of HIV and certain other sexually transmitted infections. However, there are many different prophylactic methods you can use that will significantly reduce your risk of transmitting sexually transmitted infections. And also blood is screened. So there's also that.
Okay. Woo, interesting. I like throwing a cog in the wheel there. Shocking me not at all that Canada is just changing the language. because that governments do that a lot. Institutions do that
Yeah,
a
and that's
lot.
one of our favorite things in Canada right now is like, okay, well, we're not going to necessarily get to like the underlying root cause of the discrimination, but we'll change the names and words of things. That's our like thing that we're doing here right now.
Thank you for bringing it to my attention, Jay. And I agree. Thanks to Nadine for explaining it a bit in more depth.
Yeah.
Because on the surface it was like, yay, but it's kind of like,
it's like not the worst.
But... Like at least they got rid of the words. I don't know. I don't know. I don't even have a transition to say for this one, except to say that it's also a story from Canada. But this is, I was told by Eleanor, quite a scandal, that if you're ordering at your local Freshii, they have now replaced humans, not with like the kiosk that you have at McDonald's that's just like digital. They've replaced it with a screen that has a virtual assistant in Central America who is a real person, but that they pay like $3 a day.
Okay. So that I hate. I hate them like being paid terrible low wages. I hate that. Hate that so much. More.
It allows for the face-to-face customer experience, but has virtual cashiers. Yeah.
Okay, so this is what I hate about the convenience economy. I don't even know if that's a term. It's just a thing I just made up.
I like it. We're rolling with it.
I actually don't hate the convenience element of it. I just wish that the people who were being employed to run it and make it work were being well paid, because they deserve it. Like, I had to order a new cable for my laptop from the Apple store.
Mm-hmm.
I literally ordered it at like 8 in the morning and it was at my house by like 11 in the morning. So I don't love that the person whose job it was to rush a cable to my house probably got paid like minimum wage.
Right.
That person deserves to be making like, I don't know, $30 an hour.
For dealing with what they're dealing with.
Like, running all over, I'm in Toronto, running all over Toronto, just dropping cables off at people's houses on demand. So I'm like, I don't necessarily hate that this person is in South America, but I hate that they're in South America because probably Freshii was like, oh, we don't have to pay them anything.
Yeah, and we don't have to, like, I'm sure there's, like, we don't have to care about workplace environments.
Exactly.
And, like, it could be an entirely abusive and proprietary work environment, and Canada probably can be like, I don't know.
Well, they're not beholden to our labor laws. So that part I don't like. I'm like, that person is getting me my delicious Freshii smoothie super quick, super efficiently. I'm in and out. Give them all the money and protect them at all costs. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I agree with you. I couldn't have said it better. Speaking of protecting people, I did a Dr. Kristen transition there.
Nice.
Yes, I'm getting better. This is not really an empathy exercise. This is more of an announcement from our dear friend Sasha, who's joining us today. Hi, Sasha. We had an email update from her yesterday on the attempts to have legislation that stops institutional child abuse. And so the name of the bill was a different name. It wasn't great. It was complicated to remember. It is now SICA, or the Stop Institutional Child Abuse Act.
Okay.
And it is being introduced to the Houses of Congress on the 11th of May.
Oh, wow.
And our dear beloved friend Sasha will be there to advocate on behalf of victims and survivors, and hopefully get to speak to Congress people. And she shared this link so you can read the policy document on what SICA means, the policy memo, all the information that you would need, or questions that you have about what institutional abuse is, what is the troubled teen industry, etc. But then there's information about this unsilenced website, which is this local place for all this information. So I will make sure that this is in the show notes. There's also a shop where if you want to support their efforts, you can buy like pins or t-shirts or hats or tote bags or whatever your fancy is. Where I would please encourage you to, I signed up for the newsletter so that I can keep getting information. And once the bill is introduced, I'm sure the newsletter hopefully will be sending out information on how those in the United States can contact their members of Congress to urge them to support and pass the Stop Institutional Child Abuse Act. So, announcement, it's exciting news. Hopefully it's progress for all victims and survivors of the troubled teen industry and institutional child abuse. Salutes to Sasha for her continuing effort on this. So proud to know you. I said that in the email. I'm saying it on the YouTubes as well. Good luck next week and keep us posted. All right. Whew, that was a list of things that we talked about, but I'm glad I had you with me, Nadine. And let us now commence happier topics.
Yay!
Happier topics. Although I have to admit that Kristen and I were a little had mixed feelings about Turning Red.
Fair, yeah.
It was there were parts of it that I loved,
yeah,
and parts of it that were confusing, and parts of it that I didn't quite care for. I was pretty much on the like, I like this movie. It's weird, but I like it, until her mom turned into a giant panda that like ruined the concert.
Ravaged the sky.
I was like, was this necessary? But for those of you who haven't seen Turning Red, it is the story of a young girl in Toronto. She's Chinese.
She's Chinese. Yeah, she's Chinese. Yeah.
She's Chinese Canadian. Sorry.
Yeah.
Chinese Canadian. And it's a wonderful, for what it is, I think a wonderful lived in kind of experience of what it is to be a Chinese Canadian, and part of an immigrant population, and all these references that I loved. It's set in, I think, 2004 or something. So
it's like early 2000s. Yeah.
Early 2000s. So it was real visceral for Kristen and I in terms of fashion choices.
Oh yeah, it would be.
But it's the story of this 13-year-old girl who has a bit of an emotional day and turns into a giant panda, a red panda. Has a bit of a freak out, as you do. Learns from her mother that this is a family inherited trait in the women of their family. And there's a special ceremony that you can do to contain the panda, and it has to be on the red moon and all of these things. And every other woman in her family has contained the panda.
Yeah.
Which means it's in a necklace. They don't turn into pandas ever anymore. And that is the solution her mother has provided for her. Her mother is, in my knowledge, a very stereotypical Asian immigrant mother, a culture of a lot of high pressure in terms of how she performs in school and her expectations within her family. It seems really stressful, but that was not my life and not my parents. But her mom is real intense about this. And do you remember that girl's name, Nadine? I don't remember her name.
The main character?
The main character, yeah.
May.
Thank you. Maylin. Yes. So May goes through a different experience than her mother and decides to try and integrate the panda into who she is. So there's been a lot of commentary. We have a couple show notes that we'll link about the themes in this. Yeah. But the two themes I named for today were intergenerational trauma, which we love to talk about here. And apparently so does Disney Pixar these days.
Yeah, that's really their jam these days. Encanto and now this.
I saw somebody tweet and was like, whoa, millennials running Disney Pixar have some feelings about parents, parents and grandparents. Boy, because May's grandma is something.
Yeah.
Her aunties were hilarious though. So yeah, intergenerational trauma and representation of being Chinese Canadian in this sense, and a lot of the lived-in cultural experiences of this family, that is I think one of the best things that animation is doing right now. And this comes from the director, the same director of a Academy Award-winning animated short, Bao, which was really lovely as well. So, what would you like to say about Turning Red? Thoughts and feelings, themes? Away we go.
Okay.
Where do you want to start?
Okay, so I would love to start on the theme of I'm gonna call it eroticism, and I'm gonna explain what I mean by eroticism because people are gonna be like, "What are you doing? This is a story about a girl in 8th grade." So a colleague and friend of mine, Dr. Emily Nagoski, describes eroticism not just as the feelings and energy we have connected to sex, but really the life force. That eroticism is connected to our creativity, to our drive to survive, our impulses to connect, our impulses to express ourselves, and can also be connected to sex and sexuality, but not exclusively. And so I very much saw the panda as sort of a metaphor or a representation for this sort of erotic awakening, and how that can be, when we first start to experience those sort of feelings and drives, which you can definitely involve like sexual attraction and crushes, and even things like, at one point she says to her mother, like, I like dancing, I like gyrating, just this greater like sort of awareness of our body, in addition to a lot of the actual physical changes that happen with puberty, and that we don't often, like, I think even as adults we don't feel in control of it. It just sort of starts happening, and it's kind of a bit of a hot mess express. And so one of the ideas that I found really intriguing, even if I'm not sure that they followed the thread all the way through the way I wanted them to, is when they talk about where the panda originated. They talk about how their ancestor sort of, I guess, evoked or channeled or created the panda basically it sounded like as a way to tap into her power. But then when the family moved, and I guess, immigrated to presumably North America and the Western world, that energy of the panda suddenly was not a blessing. It became a curse. And it became something to be contained. And not being Chinese, I'm not really, I'm not super familiar with that culture. I can't speak much to sort of how like feminine erotic energy is perceived of in China, or like was perceived of in ancient Chinese cultures. But living in North America, I can certainly see all the ways that, when you are a woman, when you live in a body that is codified as female in our society, everything about you that is erotic, everything about you that is messy, that is big, that is loud, that is showy, is meant to be contained. Rein it in. And if you can't, then it's bad. And that's very much treated as a curse. And then I thought it was interesting if you layer on the immigrant experience on top of that, being a first generation Canadian, specifically from a different culture, though, I very much related to the idea of it is especially imperative that we, as immigrants to this culture who feel pressure to both, like assimilate but not. I very much related to that sort of duality of like, we have to assimilate to sort of the cultural norms, but also you need to hang on to your like culture of origin. Like, what am I doing here? We can't unleash this part of us.
That's something that has to be contained.
We gotta keep it together, and everything needs to be perfect and polished and beyond reproach. That I very much related to. And so that panic that May feels, where she's just like, oh, God, like it's just bursting out of me when I'm emotional, when when I'm feeling things really deeply. This part of me is just, it's just happening, and what's going on, and I can't let I so related to that, and I was like, I remember feeling like that at that age, where I was like what is even happening? Who even am I? Like it's all too much, and I can't hold it in this like little body of mine.
I know.
And I love, like, even the part where she was like, as the panda, she was like, oh, I smell weird. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes,
Yes.
I know. Like, it's so here we have got some comments coming in, and then I want to add on to that. Jay says, yes, especially after all the teenage girls are cringe narratives. For sure. For sure. And like, I think about the kind of bullshit that we were given growing up, that like the she's all that narrative, that like she was already super thin and super pretty. They just took off her glasses and put her in a short dress, and whoa, now
she's acceptable and pretty.
Now she's acceptable. And you agree. Yes, Sasha, we're here for this content as well. That's why we're having this conversation. But yeah, I think that is what I loved about it, was the parts of the film that were unapologetically like teenage angsty.
Yes.
And like her friends having their like cute little dance offs that they had, and her mom absolutely mortifying her at the mart. Oh my god. I was
the Daisy Mart.
The Daisy Mart. I was like, no, Mom, don't do that. And like we've all had those kinds of moments, but like the unapologetic, this is what it's like to be a girl, or a person with hormones that are changing at this time, and how scary it is and how unpredictable it is. And this brings me to my next point and question or discussion with you. A lot of people, mostly more conservative leaning folks, were upset about the movie because they thought that it was talking about menstruation.
Okay, so first of all, I definitely did not see the panda as like a one-to-one metaphor for menstruation.
No, neither did us. We were like, Kristen and I watched it together when we were in Charleston for work, and we were like, so I mean, it's called Turning Red, but she's a red panda, and it's not just about like, her mom mentions it when she first turns into a panda, because she doesn't know she's turned into a panda. She just thinks she's got her period, and she's like, oh my god.
And she explicitly says like, that's not what this is. But also my other, I guess, my deeper point is like, so what if it is? Hi, newsflash. 13-year-old girls menstruate. Actually, statistically in North America, most 13-year-olds with uteruses and ovaries have already started menstruating.
I was about to say, I was 11.
I was 11.
I was 11, so don't talk to me about like 13 is too early to talk about it.
I'm like, okay, it's a thing that happens. Get over it. And
this goes, it goes back so much to what you were talking about in terms of this larger idea of erotica or eroticism, in that it's something that has to be contained, because science has been dominated by men for a long, long time. And there's a lot of bias in there that still exists about menstruation. There's still a lot we don't know about it. We have all these things to call it so that we don't call it menstruation. But like, humans who menstruate are often shamed and ostracized and made the butt of jokes for what is a biological process.
That happens a lot. Like, people are if you are out in public, people are menstruating around you all the time. Deal with it.
It's just happening. It just happens.
And so I'm like, even if that's what this movie was doing, I'm like, okay, like, maybe that makes you uncomfortable. I would really invite people to sort of sit with why then, because even if it was a one-to-one metaphor, I'm like, we're not seeing any blood. Yes, we see some animated boxes of pads. I'm like, they're literally just boxes with designs on them. There's nothing explicit happening here.
No.
And so I'm like, what is the worst that you think could possibly happen? I'm like, yes, if you had a 6 or 7-year-old who was watching this, if for some reason they made that connection on their own, because I assume the people who are upset about this have not been having conversations with their younger kids about what menstruation is. So I'm like, if you think they are going to make that connection on their own, what is it that you think will then happen as a result of that? Like, they might ask you questions about menstruation.
Right.
Why can't you not just answer their question?
But isn't that a good thing?
Isn't that a good thing? But they're probably not, like, if you haven't brought it up, why would a 6-year-old look at what, like, a 6-year-old who's going to interpret things very literally, why would a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old look at that and be like, oh, I see what this is. This is just actually code for periods.
Oh, they're menstrual pads. Like,
I know what those are.
Yeah, 6-year-olds are just going to look at a box, and if it says pads on it, they're going to be like, oh, maybe it's writing pads or like cushion pads. I don't, for like, that I sit on.
Like, what are pads? Then you can just tell them what pads are.
I know.
Would be my advice.
I know.
And then they'll know. Because I'm like, either they themselves will begin menstruating in a few short years, or they will be around a lot of people who are menstruating in a few short years, and then for like the rest of their lives.
And then forever.
And they're probably and I'm like, they're probably already around people who are menstruating. Like, my kid was around me their whole life, and I menstruated that entire time.
Like, that was the thing that just boggled my mind about the whole discussion, because I was like, what about, you're worried about your kids? Like, what about your kids' like mother? Like, she's presumably, unless she's gone through menopause, depending on her age, menstruating. Like, it's just, it's okay. And Jay makes the point, that the mom mentions her panda didn't come out until she was 18 when she met her dad. So, like,
legit.
No, it's not about menstruation. It's about, as Sasha said, yes, girls were crushing it today. All 4 of us. I feel like this is like a team effort. It is a Disney coming of age story. Like, she's figuring out who she is and how she wants to be in the world. Like, why are we upset about that? I was upset about the pandapocalypse, but I was not upset about the coming of age story.
And I can't prove this, but my suspicion is that a lot of these same critics, had we told the same basic story, but with a boy at the center of it and his group of male friends, that there wouldn't have been the same outcry about, like, oh, this is just really like some kind of coded metaphor for erections or ejaculation and having wet dreams.
No, it wouldn't have been a problem.
No.
Speaking of things that were a problem, we'll shift now to the trauma of it all and the intergenerational trauma. We get a lot from this, especially, I think we've talked about this before with when we talked about Encanto, and how, man, abuelas just all over the show are doing some damage. Mm-hmm. But humans do damage, and so that's what I loved about movies like this and movies like Encanto, is that it shows that humans are messy and families are messy, and that apparently there's a significant proportion of people working at Disney Pixar that want their parents to know that the way their parents behave like impacts them.
Which is valid.
Yeah, it's a valid conversation to be having. But I think I'm just gonna say, like, until the pandapocalypse, like, until her mom's panda became like a legit monster, I was on board with this movie. Yeah. As weird as it was, at parts where I was like, that I didn't jive with. That was one. I'm looking at my notes I pulled up, and I just wrote in all caps, "What the actual fuck is this?"
Okay, I want to hear more about that.
That was literally like at the pandapocalypse, where she was just like trashing, and I was like, "What is this? Like, why was this necessary as a part of the plot development? If somebody else has thoughts and feelings about that, please let me know." but I was like, how many, the part of it is I'm too much of a literalist at times. And I'm pretty good at suspending belief, but I'm watching this happen and I'm like, okay, so May's mom just killed 1,000 kids.
Yeah,
Like,
I
it's
was like, I'm pretty sure she like full on crushed at least some kids. Like,
like,
yeah, and like some folks just got murdered here.
I was like, and like, you know, in the epilogue, whatever they're talking about, they're joking about Pandapocalypse, and I'm like, yeah, how many kids did she kill? Like she's just tearing down. So I was like, you know, and I am not a mother. I don't know what kind of point they were making. If they were making a point that like, I think they already had made the point at that stage that that part of the story they wanted to tell was how hard it is for moms to like kind of let their children make these decisions and grow into humans who have autonomy and might make different decisions than them. I think they already showed that with her mom.
Yeah. So what was it? I didn't quite I didn't quite get the subtext there either, and so sometimes when that happens, I'll just kind of make up my own subtext and just
cool.
like maybe that's what it is.
I like
it. Yeah, so I am a mother, and so the subtext that I sort of made up for myself, where I was like, all right, murder and like destruction of Toronto's like second most famous landmark aside. I was like, I can maybe relate to this idea that when you are a parent, and I think oftentimes when you're a mother specifically, there's an even greater expectation that you contain big pieces of yourself in order to mother properly. And so I was like, maybe what we're seeing then, and I'm like, and I have definitely had these moments as a parent myself where it's like you feel like you have invested so much into trying to raise your child to be a certain kind of person, you know, whether that's, you know, and you always think like you yourself as the parent always think it's like for the best and you're doing the right thing, or at least that's what that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to turn your child into your version of a good person.
Right.
And so, you know, and I have a teenager, so I'm experiencing this now. I think, sometimes when they do things where you're like, that is like the opposite of what I have been trying to do here. There are times, at least for me, when I'm like, it is infuriating.
Right.
I don't think that it's right or fair. Sometimes that as a parent, you are infuriated because ultimately your kids are their own people. You can't actually make them into anything. They are who they are. But yeah, I have definitely had that experience of just like, you don't even know. Like, you don't even know, like, what I have held back, held in, pushed down to try and be what I've been, like, to try and be the good parent, to try and be a mom the way I'm supposed to. And now you're just doing all of this crap anyway.
Now you're selling t-shirts with your face on it.
Like, whatever it is, like, whatever that trigger point is for you, and you're just like, oh, hell no.
Yeah.
And it all just comes like bubbling up to the surface. So I have definitely had those moments, even though I didn't express it by like vandalizing the city and killing some kids, where I'm just like, are you kidding me? I am so pissed right now. We had this conversation in person where I was like, parenting is triggering as hell sometimes.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. And like I think they did that job of telling that story with how triggering it was for May's mom, especially once her mom got involved.
Yeah.
And you know, I think they did a good job of telling that story. And I love the connection that I just made while you were talking was like, there's the kind of the meta story happening here is like the pressure, you know, familially, culturally, societally to contain ourselves in some way, whether some intersection of us that is a part of who we are, whether it's being from an immigrant population or, you know, a gender identity or whatever, all of those things, your actual body just changing. So that's the kind of meta of this. Yeah. And then I think there's a couple of different stories about what happens when you try to do that. And when you don't deal with the trauma of being made to feel like you. And so like her explosion to me emotionally makes sense, especially with the context that you just gave, that like she was tried to be this version of herself that she thought was going to honor, because you know they talk about honor at the start of this movie, honoring yourself, honoring your family. It's a huge part of Chinese culture. And you know the whole temple, the family temple that they live next to, that their job is literally like honoring the family and honoring this tradition. And so she did all of this, and then she felt all this pressure, internal and external, to do the same with May. And then she perceived that she wasn't succeeding at it.
Yeah, and
like I get, like, I'm here. I wouldn't have cared if she turned into a giant panda and just like screamed for a few minutes. For me, it's just like you had to go for the children.
It's just murdering the children.
It's like that's what I have a line. I just have a line with mass murder. You know what? I don't know about anybody else.
Yeah, mass child murder. I get that. Like, you know, I think that's a reasonable line to have.
I just yeah, but I think if I just next time I watch it, I'll just stop the movie and be like, and here's where it ends.
I think in my head I was like, okay, I guess I'm just gonna accept that she didn't crush kids, even though she fully did.
Yeah, I'm just gonna tell myself that all the kids got out of the way of the 200-foot panda that was pulling down
like scaffolding and
the stage. I loved that Four Town survived and then joined the ritual. Yeah, and then the like massive ritual at the end, and like
I love that part.
It was so great, and she like found her teenage mom and like in the in-between space, like, you know, it's just without the kids dying and destroying a national landmark. Yeah, like destroy a national landmark if nobody's in it.
Well, yeah, because you can put it together. You can just like fundraise.
You can fundraise to put it back. Yeah, I mean, like, because it was one of the Batman movies, one of the Chris Nolan Batman movies that was filmed in Pittsburgh, and they like filmed some at our American football stadium, Heinz Field, and they like destroyed Heinz Field.
Oh wow!
But like they didn't really destroy Heinz Field.
Right. Yeah.
But I was like, that was a Batman movie, and I was like, we were dealing with Tom Hardy with the face mask, evil dude, and I was like, okay, but this is a movie about adolescence. Okay, yeah. I digress. But yes,
it was a lot.
Jay is agreeing with everything that you have said about being a mom.
Oh, thank you.
And those feelings. Knowing Jay, yes, I can't imagine mothering ever. And she also said that I'm being very reasonable. So I appreciate, as always, dear friend, your continued support. But I think unless you have anything else to add, I think that feels like a natural place to end. That like we have a line in the sand. It's mass murder.
It's mass murder. We don't.
But everything else, in terms of, I think, I would have liked, maybe, I guess I will say this, I would have liked if they had given more time at the end, like less destruction, more time to show May's mom processing her trauma.
Yeah. I would have liked to have seen that.
Because it gets lost in the panda apocalypse. And that's, I think, one of the things they really want people to take from this movie is that, like, you have to make time to process your trauma.
Definitely. I guess that's the last thing that I would say is I saw some people comment, and I don't entirely disagree with them. I saw some people comment that they didn't love the idea that it was because of May that her mom was able to, I guess, acknowledge and start processing that trauma. They were like, that's not a kid's job. And I'm like, agreed, like 100% agreed.
Yeah.
But also, I can't say that having my child and the ways that I've realized that I do need to change in order to love my child the way that, he needs and deserves to be loved, hasn't been integral in me processing a lot of my own generational trauma.
Right.
And in the same way that parenting can be triggering, which to all the kids out there, not because you're doing anything wrong, just because
Right. It just because humans.
humans, like, it's not your fault that we get
Yeah,
triggered
no.
by parenting.
Right.
But I will say that at the same time, I'm like, yeah, there are elements of parenting that for me, I'm like, have been the catalyst for some of my healing. And I'm very grateful for that. And is it my son's responsibility to make me better? 100% no. But just by being in that relationship with him,
Right. Right.
it's opened me up to parts of myself that I would not have been aware of otherwise, I don't think.
Yeah, and I think that's a level of nuance that a Pixar movie is never going to have.
Yeah.
And so, a criticism I would have was that I think they tried to tell too many stories.
I think that's fair.
At points, because then they ran out of time for them.
Yeah.
And so then you leave all these people with concerns about various aspects of the storylines. But yeah, I agree, and I think that's a good point. Ooh, you are preaching to Jay today, my friend.
Jay gets me. I feel like we get each other, Jay. Yes.
You do.
Yeah.
I believe that you do. In many, many more ways than just that you both have birthed other humans. But I'm so glad to have you guys with me on this, because that is often an intersection that Kristen and I obviously don't touch.
Right.
So there's only so much we can say and know about it. Obviously, we know and love lots of humans who are parents, but that's not. But I think it's so interesting that you brought up that, kids can trigger traumas, and all kinds of relationships do in different ways.
Exactly.
And so that if you're watching this, I don't know if you are, but if you hear us say this, it's not just because you're kids that it's triggering. It's not anything that you've done, and it's just life with different humans and different phases of your life that we all kind of realize things that we thought we maybe didn't have a problem with or had a grapple on, or whatever kind of cliche you want to use. But I am here for Disney if they want to keep making movies that have this level of attention to detail,
yes,
representation, and opening up the space for conversations.
I was just really thrilled to see a Pixar movie set in the place that I lived and grew up. I was like,
Yay.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
The Daisy Mart is a real place. There's one down the street from my house, and that's exactly what it looks like.
They had Timbits on the table at one point, and Kristen was like, look, Timbits.
Exactly. Love that detail.
So authentic. Yeah. Okay, so we're here for authentic representational Disney movies. We're also always here for our dear friend Nadine Thornhill joining us. Thank you, my dear, for making time in your day to have this conversation.
My pleasure, always.
I loved having you. I have no idea what Kristen and I are going to talk about next week. But you guys will find out when we find out, because then I'll tell you on the internets. Yes, the Canadiana was great in this, Jay. I agree. Yeah. It's nice. We don't set Disney movies in Canada.
I think this was the first one. The first one that I can think of.
Yeah. I mean, because we did all the fairy tale ones for most of the 20th century. Exactly. So that wasn't in Canada. Arundel's gotten lots of representation, but come on. It's time for some Canadiana. But thanks for joining us, especially Jay and Sasha, for engaging. Loved having you. Replay crew, if you're watching this back on the replay, hello from the past. Please make sure and comment below with your thoughts and feelings at various points. And, Dr. K or I will get back to you as soon as possible. I hope... I don't have the energy in me for a Dr. Kristen level benediction. I hope where you are, you have bodily autonomy, or you can fight to make sure that you and other people that you do life with have bodily autonomy. And that's where I will leave you. Nadine, love you. Speak to you soon. Everybody else, have a great day.
Bye.